All right, today we are cracking open a document that pretty much questions everything we've been told about the space race. It lays out a case that NASA's entire story, from those iconic moon landings to the brand new Artemis missions, is really just an elaborate show. And it claims the clues have been hiding in plain sight this whole time. So let's just dive right in. This whole thing really kicks off with this absolutely wild quote from astronaut Don Pettit. Now, was that just a clumsy way of phrasing something? Well, the document we're looking at says no way. It says this is a confession, spoken right out in the open.
And this is the central question, isn't it? I mean, really think about that. The argument here is that this isn't about some misplaced blueprints. It's a clue, a breadcrumb trail leading to a much, much bigger story about what's really been going on. Okay, let's start breaking this down. When you put the Apollo programs side by side with today's Artemis program, you'd obviously expect a massive leap forward, right? I mean, it's been 50 years. But what this audit points out is that what we're actually seeing is, well, it looks like a strange step backward, and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, just look at this. In 1969, with computers that were less powerful than the phone in your pocket, we supposedly landed on the moon 6 separate times. Now, with quantum computing and AI, we're spending over a decade and billions of dollars just to do a flyby. How is that possible? The progress seems to be going in the wrong direction.
So it's not just about the weird technology paradox. According to this analysis, there's a huge physical barrier that's been there from day one, and it's a problem that we still haven't actually solved. You've probably heard of them, the Van Allen radiation belts. We've known they exist since 1958, and they're not just a minor inconvenience. We're talking about a lethal wall of high-energy radiation that any mission trying to leave Earth's orbit has to somehow get through. Now, this number is absolutely key. The claim is that, based on all the available data, the Apollo astronauts would have absorbed half a sievert of radiation. To put that in perspective, that is the entire career limit for a modern astronaut absorbed in a single week. The result wouldn't be subtle. It would be severe, acute radiation sickness, period. And this is where it gets really interesting with the new Artemis missions. Artemis 1 was uncrewed. They sent up these special mannequins loaded with sensors specifically to measure the biological danger. So what did they find? Well, the source claims that raw data has been totally buried. Then Artemis 2 sends a human crew on the exact same path, and they come back perfectly healthy. So the big question is, if the mannequin data proved it was lethal, how did the human crew return without a scratch? The allegation is simple. They never went through the belts at all. They just stayed in low Earth orbit. So this brings us right back to that original nagging question. How do you just forget how to fly to the moon? The source calls it technological amnesia and argues it's not just strange, it's basically impossible. Let's go back to what Don Pettit said. We destroyed that technology. Think about that. You don't just throw out the plans for the Hoover Dam or the Eiffel Tower. The argument here is that the only reason you'd ever destroy the blueprints to your greatest triumph is if those plans actually proved the whole thing was just an incredibly expensive prop. Okay, so if it's all just a show, then what's the point of it all? Well, as you can probably guess, you have to follow the money. The core argument here is that the Artemis program isn't really about exploring space. It's about moving mind-boggling amounts of cash. And we're not talking small amounts. NASA's own Inspector General projects the Artemis program is going to cost $93 billion. Let that sink in. $93 billion to recreate something we supposedly did with 1960s tech. And get this, every single launch of their new SLS rocket costs over $4 billion. $4 billion. For a rocket that uses refurbished engines from the old shuttle program and then just gets thrown away in the ocean after one use, it's staggering. So where is all that money actually going? Well, the theory laid out in this audit is that Artemis is basically a giant legal money funnel. Tax dollars get allocated for the public rocket program we all see. That money then gets paid to the big aerospace contractors. And then, it's alleged, they use those funds to build the real space fleet, a classified, top-secret, and highly advanced program that is completely hidden from public view. And finally, the audit gets to what it calls the ultimate proof of the whole deception. It argues that Apollo was, from the beginning, a television production, and that its most crucial piece of evidence was later criminally destroyed. The document points to the original Apollo footage and images, highlighting things that, well, just don't obey the laws of physics. Why are there no stars in a perfectly black sky?
Why do shadows from the sun run in different directions, like they're from multiple studio lights? How is a flag waving in a vacuum? And maybe the biggest one, where is the massive blast crater the lunar lander should have made when it landed? The argument is that these aren't just mistakes. They're forensic proof it was all filmed on a soundstage.
And this, according to the source, is the final nail in the coffin. The original, high-quality, crystal-clear master tapes of the moon landing, they just vanished. Years later, NASA's official story became that they were accidentally erased and taped over to save a few bucks. The argument presented here is that this wasn't an accident. It was the deliberate, systematic destruction of evidence.
Which leaves us all with one final, haunting question. How does the clearest, highest quality recording of what is supposedly humanity's single greatest achievement just disappear? Was it a tragic bureaucratic screw-up? Or was destroying those tapes the final act needed to protect the secret?